I was three under on the back nine when my phone started buzzing in my pocket and I let it buzz. Best round I'd had in 2 years. September sun, cool enough to be comfortable, and I was playing like somebody 20 years younger. I finished the hole, shook hands with the two guys I'd been paired with, and walked to the parking lot feeling about as good as a 54-year-old bail bondsman from Zanesville, Ohio, has any right to feel on a Tuesday afternoon. I loaded my clubs into the bed of the F-150, got in, and hit the ignition. The CarPlay screen woke up. Carol had borrowed the truck that morning to drop her car at the dealership, and her phone had stayed paired to the system. Her iMessage thread was right there on the screen. The contact name was Dennis K. I went still, not because I suspected anything, because Dennis K. is my brother. I tapped it. The preview line loaded. I read it. Then I read it again. The message Carol meant to send Dennis said some things about their plans for the weekend, said some things I won't repeat here because they don't matter anymore. And then it said this about me. You're a burden, and every day with you was wasted. When my wife said, you're a burden, and every day with you was wasted. That sentence just sat there on the screen in her handwriting, in her font, with her name at the top. I didn't say anything out loud. I didn't make a sound. I just sat in the parking lot of Meadowbrook Golf Course, with my hands on the steering wheel, and let it land. I put the truck in drive. I did not call Carol. I did not call Dennis. I drove home at exactly the speed limit, which is something I almost never do. I got home before she did, changed out of my golf clothes, started dinner. Pork chops, frozen green beans, nothing special. Carol came in about 20 minutes later, set her bag on the counter, and said the kitchen smelled good. You're home early, she said. Finish the back nine, I said. I shot well. Good day then. Yeah, I said. Good day. We watched the evening news. She talked about a school board meeting, some budget thing, a principal she didn't like. I nodded at the right places. She asked if something was wrong. You're quiet, she said. Long day. She seemed to accept that. Carol had a talent for accepting explanations that made her comfortable. It was one of the things I used to find convenient about her. That night, I lay on my side of the bed with my eyes open and listened to her breathe herself to sleep. She was out in 20 minutes. She always slept well. I used to think that was just how she was built. Now I was revising that theory. I did the math in my head. Not angry math, not the kind where you run through every fight and every slight and build a case. Just actual math. The joint accounts. The business account Dennis was a silent partner on. The house deed, which had both our names on it. The truck, which was in my name only. My tools, which were mine. 22 years of marriage reduced to a balance sheet at 2 in the morning, while my wife slept 8 inches away from me. I got up quiet, went to the garage in my socks, and stood in the dark. I didn't hit anything. I didn't break anything. I just stood there with my hand on the cold frame of the rolling toolbox and let my body do what my brain was still catching up to. My chest felt like something had been removed from it, and the cavity hadn't closed yet. I stood there for an hour. The pork chop smell had drifted out from the kitchen. I thought about my brother's face at Christmas, his hand on Carol's shoulder in photographs I was now re-examining in my memory, like evidence. I thought about 3 Tuesdays I could now name, when his truck had been parked in front of this house while I was at work. I know this because I can see the street from the bail office window 2 miles away, and I have a memory that doesn't let go of things even when I want it to. Then I went back inside, sat at the kitchen table, and started writing down numbers. I wasn't angry yet. I was something worse than angry. I was decided. Monday morning, I was at my desk at Kowalski Bail Bonds by 7:30. The office is a storefront on the courthouse plaza. Fluorescent lights, a buzzing door lock, a wall of skip trace folders, and the permanent smell of burnt coffee and old carpet. I've been there 22 years. I know every file in that room. I pulled my own records first. The joint accounts, the business account, the house deed. I made a list. Boyd Hatch, my assistant, came in at 8. He's 30, good kid, asks questions. When he needs to and doesn't when he doesn't. He looked at me for a second when he came through the door. The way you look at someone when something's off, but you can't name it. You need anything? He asked. Boyd, I said. You know how to run a skip trace on someone you already know the address of? He blinked. Sure. Why? Practice, I said. He nodded and went to his desk. That's what I mean about Boyd. He doesn't push. I called Walt Greer from the office landline. Not my cell. Walt is 61, retired Muskingum County Sheriff's deputy, runs a one-man PI shop out of his house on Putnam Avenue. We've known each other 15 years. He drinks a little too much bourbon, and he knows it, which makes him careful about everything else. Walt, I said, you still have your contact at the licensing board? Which one? Contractors. Yeah, he said. You buying lunch? Thursday, Bud's. Thursday morning, corner booth at Bud's Diner, eggs over easy, and wheat toast. Walt was already there when I arrived. Coffee in front of him, manila folder on the seat beside him. He slid it across the table before I even sat down. Dennis's contractor license history. One prior complaint, a bond that had almost lapsed 2 years ago, a pattern of late filings. Nothing that would pull his license on its own. But a pattern is a pattern. He's sloppy about the paperwork, Walt said. Always has been. I know, I said. Ray, how bad is it? Bad enough? You want me to make calls? Not yet, I said. I want to know everything first. Walt drank his coffee and looked at me over the rim. There's a woman named Tammy Rudd. Works at the clerk's office. She was involved with Dennis 4 years back. Deputy friend of mine mentioned she has a voicemail she's been sitting on. What kind of voicemail? The kind you keep because you know someday somebody's going to need to hear it. She'll talk to me? She won't come to you, but she'll talk if you come to her. I went to the clerk's office on a Wednesday morning. Tammy Rudd is 43, brown hair, wary eyes. She looked at me for a long moment when I told her who I was. You're his brother, she said. I was, I said. She looked at me a little longer. He does this. You know that now. I'm starting to. I have a voicemail, she said, from when I tried to end it. He said some things. I kept it because I knew someday somebody would need to hear it. Can you send it to an attorney? Give me a name. I called Pete Dunbar that afternoon. Pete's been practicing law in Muskingum County for 24 years, criminal defense mostly, but he knows every corner of the law in this county and a few counties beyond. He's affable, meticulous, and collects favors the way other men collect receipts. He never wastes one. Ray, he said, what kind of trouble? The kind that needs a paper trail, not a courtroom. My favorite kind, he said. Come in Friday. That night I went home, made dinner again, ate with Carol, watched the news, said the right things. She was distant, which was fine. She was managing something, and her way of managing things was to get quiet and pull inward. 22 years I'd thought that was her being moody. Now I understood she was just covering her tracks, same as I was covering mine. After she went to bed, I went to the garage and started hitting the heavy bag. I've had that bag for 12 years. It's hung from a ceiling joist in the corner of the garage, and I've neglected it for most of those 12 years. But I went at it that night like I had something to prove to it. Not hard at first, then harder. The tape on the bag's seam was old and rough, and my knuckles found it on about the 15th punch and split open on the right hand. I stopped, wrapped a dish towel around my hand, and stood there breathing. I went to bed. Carol didn't wake up. Kelly called me the next morning on my work cell. Kelly's my daughter, 24, works medical billing at Muskingum Valley Health Centers. She's sharp and she's loyal, and she has my habit of going very quiet when she's very angry. Dad, she said, Uncle Dennis's truck was in your driveway on a Tuesday. You were at work. I drove by. I didn't say anything for a second. Kelly, don't tell me I'm wrong. You're not wrong, I said. Tell me what you need. Stay out of it for now. Dad, I mean it, I said. For now. She was quiet for a moment. Then, okay, for now. That evening, Carol came home and found me at the kitchen table with some papers spread out. She assumed it was work. She made a comment about the house being cluttered, about me always bringing work home, about how she couldn't have people over because the place looked like a bail office. Can you not do this at the kitchen table? She said. I asked you 100 times. Sure, I said. I'm serious, Ray. This is a home, not your office. I said sure, Carol. You always say sure, and then nothing changes. I stacked the papers, tucked them into my jacket, and went to the garage. I did not raise my voice. I did not slam anything. I closed the door quietly behind me. That's the thing about going quiet. It scared her more than yelling ever did. She just didn't know it yet. Pete Dunbar called me back Friday afternoon and said 4 words before I even sat down across from his desk. Dennis is already exposed. I asked how bad. He opened a folder and pushed it toward me. I looked at the top page. Then I looked at Pete. How long have you known? I asked. Long enough, Pete said, that I'm glad you called me first. The following week, I kept going to work, kept coming home, kept making dinner. I was methodical about it. The thing about working in bail bonds for 22 years is you learn that the most dangerous thing you can do is move fast. Fast gets people hurt. Fast gets people caught. Slow and steady is how you actually get somewhere. I pulled one more file at the office that week, a bond tied to Dennis's contracting license, due for renewal in 60 days. His business couldn't operate without it. He'd been sloppy about the renewal twice before. I made a note. I filed it. I didn't do anything with it yet. Then Sandra called. She called Kelly first, and Kelly called me. Sandra Kowalski is Dennis's wife. She's 47, teaches 3rd grade at Zanesville City Schools, patient and careful, and as I was learning, quietly devastated. She'd been doing her own math for months. We met in the parking lot at Bud's Diner on a Thursday morning, early, before the breakfast rush. She pulled up in her Civic, and I was already there in the F-150. She got in on the passenger side. She handed me a folder. Phone records, a hotel receipt from Columbus. A photograph she didn't describe and I didn't ask about. I've had this for 6 weeks, she said. I didn't know who to give it to. Why me? I asked. Because you're the only other person he hurt. He hurt you worse, I said. Maybe, but you're the one who can do something about it. I took Pete Dunbar's card from my jacket pocket and handed it to her. Call him. Tell him I sent you. He'll know what to do with that folder. She looked at the card for a moment. Are you going to be okay? She asked. I'm going to be fine, I said. Are you? I will be, she said. We sat there another minute. Neither of us said anything else. Sometimes that's enough. The Contractor Association annual dinner at the Anchor Tap Room was on a Friday night. Dennis was getting a regional award for project volume. He'd been talking about it for 2 months at family dinners. I no longer attended in my head, even when I was physically present. I was not invited. I showed up anyway, in a sport coat, with Walt Greer beside me. The Anchor's banquet room is in the back, past the main bar. Drop-ceiling, round tables with those cheap centerpieces, a cash bar in the corner. About 40 people, all contractors and their spouses, and a few city officials. The kind of room where everybody knows everybody's truck. We walked in during the cocktail hour. Dennis saw me from across the room and went still. Carol wasn't there. This was a trade event. Dennis's business partner, Frank Boyle, intercepted us near the door. Ray, he said, didn't know you were coming. Forgot to RSVP, I said. Dennis around? He's over by the bar. I walked to the bar. Dennis turned around and the color left his face. He recovered fast. I'll give him that. He always was good at recovering fast. Ray, he said, what are you doing here? Came to see you get your award, Dennis. Seemed like the kind of thing a brother shouldn't miss. This isn't the place, he said low. No, you're right. The place was my house, apparently, on Tuesdays. He grabbed my arm and tried to pull me toward the hallway. I didn't move. He pulled harder. I turned, broke the grip, and shoved him back into the bar. Not a punch, not a swing. Just a flat-handed push that sent his drink across the bar top and Dennis into the rail. Glasses slid, 2 people stepped back. Walt was already between us. That's enough, Walt said quiet. You're out of your mind, Dennis said, catching himself on the rail. Sandra called Pete Dunbar today, I said. I thought you should know that before you get your award. Dennis went quiet. The kind of quiet I recognized because I'd been doing it myself for 3 weeks. I straightened my jacket, nodded at Walt, and we walked out. We did not run. We did not look back. Kelly was in the parking lot. She'd followed me because she knew I was going to do something and she wanted to be there. Dad, she said, what did you just do? Nothing that'll cost me. You pushed him in front of 40 people. I moved him out of my way. There's a difference. Dad, you need to be careful. Kelly, I said, I've been careful for 22 years. I know what careful looks like. That back there, that was careful. She stared at me. Then she nodded once and got in her car. Carol called me 40 minutes later. Dennis had already gotten to her. Ray, what is wrong with you? You went to his dinner? I went to support my brother. Don't do that. Don't be cute about this. I'm not being anything, Carol. Dennis said you made a scene. Dennis spilled his own drink. Ray. Good night, Carol, I said, and I hung up. First time in 22 years, I'd hung up on her. It felt like putting down something heavy. I sat in the Anchor parking lot for 20 minutes after Kelly left. Walt had gone home. The banquet room lights were still on. I could see the silhouettes through the frosted glass, somebody at a podium, probably giving Dennis his plaque. I thought, let him have it. He won't have it long. I put the truck in reverse and drove home to a house I was already leaving in my head. The 3 weeks after the Anchor were the strangest weeks of my life. I was living in that house, like a man who'd already moved out. I made dinner. I watched the news. I said the right things. I did not touch Carol, and she did not try to touch me, which told me she was managing her own guilt, the same way she always managed inconvenient things, by pretending they didn't exist until they went away on their own. I went to Pete Dunbar's office on a Tuesday morning. Pete had a legal pad on his desk and a cup of coffee he wasn't drinking. He laid it out clean. You resign from the Kowalski Bail Bonds Partnership, he said. Transfer your equity to a separate LLC. I've got the paperwork ready. There's a position at Volunteer State Bail Bonds in Knoxville, Tennessee. Colleague of mine named Hatch Norris brokered it. They need someone with your experience, and they're willing to start you at a number that'll work. I've also got a rental property lined up on the south side of Knoxville. Friend of mine, reasonable rate, month to month. You've been busy, I said. You're a good client, Pete said. Sign here. I moved money in small transfers over 10 days. Nothing that would trigger a flag. Nothing Carol would notice in the joint account she barely checked. I opened a solo account at a Fifth Third branch in Knoxville. Drove down there on a Saturday. Told Carol I was going to look at a bond situation, which was technically true. I inventoried my tools in the garage over 3 evenings after Carol went to bed. 2 rolling toolboxes, a cordless set, a box of personal documents, 1 box of photographs. I did not take the wedding photos. I took the ones of Kelly at different ages, a few from fishing trips with my dad before he passed, one of my mother at Christmas from 1987 that I've kept in a frame on my workbench for years. I called Gary Solt on a Thursday evening. Gary's 55, runs Solt Hardware on Maple, family-owned 28 years. He's conflict-averse by nature, loyal by choice once he's forced to pick. He and I have been friends since our kids were in the same little league. Gary, I said, I need you to hold something for me. What kind of something? A storage unit key, and a number to call if Carol comes asking where I went. Ray, what's going on? I'll explain it someday. Right now I need you to hold the key. Pause. Okay, he said. Okay, Ray. I rented a storage unit on Linden Avenue, put my 2 toolboxes and the boxes in it, and gave Gary the key. The plan was to have someone with a trailer pick everything up after I was gone. The last fight with Carol happened on a Wednesday night. It wasn't a big fight. That's the thing. It wasn't plates thrown or voices through the walls. It was the quiet kind, which is always worse. She came home from work in a mood. She'd had a hard day, something about a school board audit. And she walked in and looked at the kitchen and looked at me and said, You didn't even start dinner. I was going to, I said. You were sitting there. I was thinking. She set her bag down hard on the counter. You know what, Ray? I'm tired. I am genuinely tired. I come home and nothing is done and you're just sitting there and I have to do everything and I don't know what I'm even doing here anymore. I looked at her. What does that mean? It means I don't know what we're doing. I don't know what this is. This is a marriage, Carol. Is it? She said. Because it doesn't feel like one. I was very quiet for a moment. No, I said. I don't suppose it does. She waited for more. I didn't give her more. She went to the bedroom and closed the door. I sat at the kitchen table for a while. Then I went to the garage and stood next to my toolboxes, which were now empty because the real ones were in the storage unit on Linden. Carol never noticed the toolboxes were empty. That told me everything I needed to know about how well she'd been paying attention. The next morning was a Thursday. Carol left for work at 7:15. I watched her Camry back out of the driveway from the kitchen window. I had 2 hours. I'd already packed 3 bags in the bedroom closet behind the winter coats for a week. I loaded them into the truck. I took my box of photographs from under the workbench in the garage, where I'd kept one box back from the storage unit for this moment. I took my father's old tackle box that had been on a shelf in the garage for 15 years. I took the wedding ring off my left hand and set it on the laminate kitchen counter, right in the middle, where she'd see it when she came home. I walked through the house once. Living room, kitchen, bathroom, bedroom. I didn't take long. There wasn't anything else I wanted. I got in the truck. I drove out of Zanesville, Ohio on Route 40, heading south. I did not leave a note. I quietly moved my things out. While she was at work, I vanished completely. That's exactly what I did. The drive from Zanesville to Knoxville is 8 hours and change if you don't stop. I stopped once at a truck stop outside Corbin, Kentucky. I pulled in, parked at the far end of the lot away from the pumps, and turned the engine off. I sat there for a while. I'm not going to tell you I didn't feel it. I felt it. 22 years of a life. A house I'd put new gutters on in 2018. A garage I'd poured a better concrete pad for in 2015. A kitchen where I'd made dinner 1,000 times. And a living room where I'd watched 1,000 games, and a bed where I'd slept next to a woman who was telling someone else, in writing, that every day with me was wasted. I sat in that truck stop parking lot in Corbin, Kentucky, and I let myself feel it, all of it, the whole weight of it. Then I started the engine and drove the rest of the way to Knoxville. I got there at dusk. The rental house was on Sevier Avenue, south side, a small 2-bedroom with a covered front porch and a yard that needed work. Pete's friend had left a key under the mat, which I'd told him was a terrible idea, and he'd done anyway. I let myself in, set my bags down, and stood in an empty house in a city where nobody knew me. I found a Jim Beam in the cabinet above the refrigerator. Pete's friend had left it as a housewarming gift, apparently. I poured 2 fingers into a coffee mug, sat on the floor of the empty living room with my back against the wall, and drank it. I did not pour a second one. I went to sleep on the floor with my jacket rolled up under my head, and I slept better than I had in months. Volunteer State Bail Bonds operates out of a strip mall on Chapman Highway. The owner, Hatch Norris, is 63, a former Knox County Sheriff's investigator who went private and never looked back. He's got 3 employees, a bail runner named Curtis, a bookkeeper named Phyllis, and an office manager named Marta Varga. Marta is 48. She came over from Hungary after a bad marriage, got her citizenship, and has been in Knoxville for 9 years. She's composed and direct and has no patience for self-pity, but she has plenty of patience for honesty. She looked at me on my first day like she was reading a document. "You're the one from Ohio," she said. "Ray Kowalski," I said. "Marta Varga," she said. "The coffee machine is broken on Mondays. I don't know why, don't ask me. If you need something filed, give it to me by 3 or I can't guarantee it goes out today. Hatch will tell you about the parking situation. It's bad." "Okay," I said. "You're going to be fine here," she said. It wasn't a question. "I know," I said. She went back to her desk. That was it. That was the whole introduction. I liked her immediately. I started learning the Knoxville system. Different county, different court, different rhythms. But bail bonds is bail bonds. I know how money moves. I know how people hide. I know how to read a risk. Within 2 weeks, Hatch was sending me the complicated cases. I bought furniture, a bed, a couch, a kitchen table with 2 chairs. I put the photograph of my mother at Christmas on the kitchen windowsill. I found a diner 3 blocks from the office called Patton's that did eggs over easy and wheat toast. And I started going there on Thursday mornings, which is just a habit I have. I called Kelly every Sunday. She knew where I was. She was the only one in Zanesville who did. "Are you okay?" she asked the first Sunday. "Yeah," I said. "I'm okay. Mom found the ring," she said, and I figured. She called me 4 times. "What did you tell her?" I told her I didn't know where you were. "That was the right thing to say," I said. "Dad," Kelly said. "She's going to figure it out eventually." "Eventually is fine," I said. "Eventually is a long way from now." Kelly was quiet for a moment. "Are you happy there?" I thought about that. The covered porch, the diner on Thursdays. The way the Tennessee fall was coming in cooler and cleaner than Ohio summers. The way Marta said good morning every day like it was a statement of fact rather than a pleasantry. I'm getting there, I said. Good, she said. That's enough for now. Carol called my cell twice in the first week. I didn't answer. She left a voicemail the second time, her voice tight and controlled, saying she didn't understand what was happening and she needed to talk to me. I listened to the voicemail once and deleted it. She called a third time 2 weeks later. I didn't answer that one either. I did not block her number. I wanted to know when she called so I could see how long it took her to stop. It took her longer than I expected. I'll give her that much. The fall moved into winter and I settled into Knoxville the way you settle into a new pair of work boots. Uncomfortable at first, then worn in, then you can't imagine wearing anything else. I learned the city. I learned which gas stations were worth stopping at and which ones weren't, which roads backed up at 5 o'clock, where the good hardware store was, which judge in Knox County was reasonable about bail conditions, and which one wasn't. I learned the names of the regulars at Patton's Diner, and they learned mine. At the office, Marta and I developed a rhythm. She ran the administrative side with a precision that made me look disorganized, which was humbling. I handled the field cases and the skip traces. We had lunch together most days, either at the diner or at a pulled pork place on Chapman that she called aggressively Southern, and ate it enthusiastically anyway. You're not from here, she said one afternoon over lunch, about 3 months in. It was an observation, not a question. Ohio, I said. I know, you're not from anywhere yet. You're still deciding. I looked at her. That obvious? To me, she said, not to everyone. How long did it take you, I asked. After you moved here? She thought about it. About a year before I stopped flinching when someone asked me where I was from. About 2 years before I stopped comparing everything to Budapest. She picked up her fork. It gets easier. You just have to stop waiting for it to feel like the old place. What if the old place wasn't that great? I said. Then it goes faster, she said. I laughed. She looked pleased that she'd made me laugh. That was the first time, not the last. Back in Zanesville, things were moving the way Pete had told me they would. Pete called me every few weeks with updates, always from his office line, always brief. Dennis's contractor license bond had come up for renewal, and Pete had made sure the right questions got asked at the licensing board. Nothing fraudulent, nothing that wouldn't hold up to scrutiny. Just the right questions, asked by the right person at the right time. Dennis's license was placed under a 60-day review. His biggest project, a commercial renovation on 5th Street, went on hold while the review was pending. The general contractor on the job called Dennis's business partner Frank Boyle directly and told him they couldn't wait 60 days and were going to bring in another sub. That job was worth $240,000 to Dennis's company. He knows it came from somewhere, Pete told me. He just can't prove it. Good, I said. There's more, Pete said. Sandra filed. She's got a good attorney. The hotel receipts and the phone records are going to make the discovery process very interesting for Dennis. How's Sandra doing? Better than you'd expect. She's got a good head on her shoulders. She does, I said. Walt Greer called me separately about 4 months in. He'd heard through his deputy network that Carol had hired a private investigator to find me. Figured she would, I said. The PI she hired is Danny Korek, Walt said. He's not bad. He'll find you eventually. How long? Depends on how careful you've been. I've been careful, I said. Then a while, Walt said. Ray, you know she's going to show up when he does find you. I know, I said. What are you going to do? Nothing, I said. Walt was quiet for a second. Nothing? Nothing, I said. I heard him exhale. Okay, he said. That's actually the right answer. I know, I said. Gary Solt called me around month 5. Gary, my hardware store friend, the conflict avoider who'd held my storage unit key. He'd been forced to pick a side, which I'd known he eventually would be. Carol came into the store, he said. She asked me if I knew where you were. What did you tell her? I told her I didn't know. He paused. Ray, I didn't lie for you. I genuinely don't know your address. That's why I didn't give it to you, I said. Oh, he said. That's actually smart. How did she seem, I asked. Scared, Gary said, and angry, but mostly scared. Okay, I said. She said Dennis told her it was your fault. That you went crazy and pushed him at some dinner and then just disappeared. Of course he did, I said. I didn't say anything to that, Gary said. I just let her talk. That's fine, Gary. Ray. He stopped. I should have called you. Back when? When I saw his truck over there. I noticed it and I thought it was probably nothing and I didn't call you. Gary. I should have. It wouldn't have changed anything, I said. It would have just given me more time to be angry. I had enough time to be angry. He was quiet. Are you doing okay down there? Yeah, I said. I'm doing okay. Good, he said. That's good, Ray. I found out later that Gary, after hanging up with me, went to Dennis's job site on Maple Street and told Dennis, in front of 3 of Dennis's workers, that he was a sorry son of a bitch who didn't deserve the family name. I didn't ask him to do that. He just did it. Conflict averse by nature. Loyal by choice. That's Gary Solt. The person who actually found me was not Carol's PI. It was Dale Pruitt. Dale is 56, runs Dale's Automotive in Chillicothe, Ohio, 19 years. He was my closest friend for about 15 years, until Carol made it clear she didn't like him, which she did in the subtle way she did things she didn't like. A comment here, a look there, a dinner invitation that somehow always conflicted with plans she'd made. Dale's plain-spoken and steady, and he recognized what was happening, and eventually he just stopped coming around. He never made a thing out of it. He just went away quietly, the way decent people do when they're not wanted. He called me about 6 months after I left Zanesville. My cell number hadn't changed. Ray, he said, it's Dale. I sat up straighter. Dale! I heard you left. You heard right. You doing okay? Yeah, where'd you hear? Gary Solt, he said. He didn't give me your number. I still had it from before. Dale, I said. I'm sorry, Carol. Don't, he said. That's done. I just wanted to make sure you were alive. I'm alive, I said. I'm in Knoxville. Tennessee? Tennessee. Huh? He said. And how is it? Good, I said. It's actually good. Good, he said. You need anything? No, I said, but I might call you sometime. Anytime, he said. Day or night, you know that. I did know that. I'd always known that. Carol had just made me forget it for a while. Dale drove down to Knoxville 4 months later just to see the place. He stayed for a weekend, slept on my couch, ate pulled pork, met Marta briefly when we stopped by the office on a Saturday so I could grab a file. She seems like a good person, Dale said afterward, in the truck. She is, I said. You like her. I work with her. Ray, he said. I've known you for 30 years. You like her. I drove for a minute. Yeah, I said, I like her. Good, Dale said. About damn time. He drove back to Chillicothe Sunday afternoon and I stood on the porch and watched his truck go down Sevier Avenue and felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Not quite happy, something closer to settled. A week after Dale's visit, Marta and I had dinner that was not a work lunch. We went to a place on Market Square that she'd been suggesting for 2 months and I'd been finding reasons to put off, which she called me on directly. You've been avoiding this, she said over the menu. I've been busy, I said. You've been scared, she said not unkindly. I put the menu down. Yeah, I said. I've been scared. That's honest, she said. I can work with honest. I'm not in a great place to start something, I said. My divorce isn't final yet. I know, she said. I'm not asking you to marry me, I'm asking you to have dinner. Fair enough, I said. We had dinner. We talked for 3 hours. She told me about Budapest, about her first marriage, about the particular exhaustion of being in a relationship where you're the only one trying. I told her about Zanesville, about the bail bonds office, about 22 years of making myself smaller. Why did you do that? She asked. Make yourself smaller. Because it was easier than the alternative, I said. What was the alternative? Admitting that it wasn't working. She nodded. I did the same thing, she said, for 7 years, and then one day I just stopped. What happened? He came home and said something cruel. Not the cruelest thing he'd ever said, just one more. And I thought, I am done collecting these. And I left. Just like that? Just like that, she said. The decision was the hard part. The leaving was easy. I looked at her across the table. Yeah, I said, that's about right. We walked back to our cars after dinner. She stopped on the sidewalk and looked at me. Ray, she said, I'm not in a hurry. Neither are you. But I'm also not going to pretend I don't know what's happening here. What's happening here? I said. Something good, she said, for a change. I walked her to her car. We said goodnight. I drove home with the windows down, the Tennessee fall coming through, and I thought, yeah, something good. For a change. The divorce was final 14 months after I left Zanesville. Pete handled it from his end. Carol had an attorney, a woman named Phyllis Reardon, who Pete described as competent, but not inspired. The settlement was straightforward. The house sold. The joint accounts were split. The bail bonds business equity I'd already transferred to the LLC was mine, clean. Pete had made sure of that months earlier. Carol got the house proceeds, which were fair. I got my business equity and my retirement account and my truck, which were also fair. There was nothing dramatic about it. 22 years, and it ended with signatures on paper that Pete FedExed to me in Knoxville. And I signed at the kitchen table and FedExed back. I called Kelly when it was done. It's final, I said. How do you feel? She asked. Like I put something down that was too heavy, I said. Good, she said. That's the right answer. How's your mom? I asked. She's okay, Kelly said, careful. She's managing. Is she still with Dennis? Pause. No, Kelly said. That ended. Sandra's divorce went through and Dennis lost that Fifth Street project and his business partner bought him out. He's working for somebody else now. I don't know the details. Okay, I said. Dad, Kelly said. He came to see me, Uncle Dennis. He wanted me to tell you he was sorry. I thought about that for a moment. My brother's face at Christmas, his hand on Carol's shoulder in photographs, the color leaving his face at the Anchor tap room. What did you tell him? I asked. I told him I'd pass it along, she said. I'm passing it along. Okay, I said. What do you want me to tell him? Tell him I heard him, I said. That's it? That's it. She was quiet. Okay, Dad. Kelly, you should come down here sometime. See the place. I was waiting for you to ask, she said. I'm asking. I'll come in the spring, she said. I want to meet Marta. How do you know about Marta? I said. Dad, she said. I'm your daughter. I know everything. I laughed. Out loud, genuinely. It felt good. Spring, I said. I'll make up the guest room. Make sure there's good coffee, she said. Not that bail office stuff. I'll get a decent machine, I said. And Dad, she said. I'm glad you're okay. I'm really glad. Me too, kid, I said. Me too. The call from Gary Solt came on a Tuesday morning in April, about 5 years after I'd left Zanesville. 5 years. It sounds like a long time. In some ways it was. In other ways it felt like I'd blinked and the whole Ohio chapter was just something that had happened to a version of me that no longer existed. I was at my desk at Volunteer State working through a skip trace file when my cell rang. Gary's name on the screen. Gary, I said. Ray? He sounded careful. I need to tell you something. Okay. Carol hired that PI again, Korek, and this time he found you. I set down my pen. When? I heard about it yesterday, through Dennis, actually. He still talks to me sometimes. He said Carol found out you were in Knoxville and she was going to drive down. Drive down, I said. Ray, she's already gone. She left yesterday morning. It's 13 hours from here. I looked at my watch. I did the math. She'll be there by tonight, I said. Yeah, Gary said, and I'm sorry. I thought you should know. Thanks, Gary, I said. I mean it. I hung up and sat for a moment. Then I called Marta's extension. Can you come in here for a second? I said. She came in and stood in the doorway. She looked at my face and came in and closed the door. What happened? She said. My ex-wife is driving 13 hours to my front door, I said. She'll probably be there tonight or tomorrow morning. Marta sat down in the chair across from my desk. What are you going to do? Nothing, I said. She looked at me. Nothing? Nothing, I said. I'm going to go home tonight. I'm going to eat dinner. I'm going to go to bed. And if she shows up at my door, I'm going to let her stand there. Marta was quiet for a moment. You're sure? I've been sure about this for 5 years, I said. She nodded slowly. Okay. I just wanted you to know, I said, in case it gets complicated. It won't get complicated, she said. You know that. Yeah, I said. I do. She stood up. Come to dinner tonight. My place. I'll make something. Marta, Ray, she said. Come to dinner. You shouldn't be alone in that house waiting for a car that may or may not show up. She was right. She usually was. Okay, I said. And what time? 7, she said. Don't bring wine. You always bring the wrong kind. I brought a perfectly good cab last time, I said. I don't drink red, she said, and went back to her desk. I laughed. The second time that day, which was a good sign. I went to Marta's for dinner. She made chicken paprikash, which she said was the Hungarian equivalent of comfort food, and I ate 2 plates of it and told her it was the best thing I'd eaten since I'd moved to Knoxville, which was probably true. We sat on her back porch after dinner. She had a string of lights along the railing and a small table with 2 chairs and a citronella candle, and the Tennessee April was warm and soft and smelled like something blooming. Tell me about her, Marta said. "Oh, Carol?" Yes. Why? Because you've never told me much, and tonight seems like the right time. I thought about how to say it. She's smart, I said. She's good at managing things. She's good at managing people, at making a room feel like she's in charge of it. She needed an audience to feel real. And I stopped being a good audience. Because you stopped being interested in the performance, Marta said. Something like that, I said. Or maybe I was never interested enough and I just didn't know it. Do you still love her? I thought about that, honestly. I loved who I thought she was, I said. I don't know if that's the same thing. Marta nodded. That's an honest answer. She's going to stand on my porch, I said. She drove 13 hours to stand on my porch. That's something. What does it mean to you? It means she finally ran out of ways to not deal with it, I said. It means she did the math and didn't like the answer. It means she's scared. Are you going to open the door? No, I said. Marta looked at me. No. No, I said. She said every day with me was wasted. She said I was a burden. She said that to my brother in writing while I was at a golf course having the best round I'd had in 2 years. I didn't get a door. I got a CarPlay screen. Marta was quiet. She doesn't get a door either, I said. Marta reached over and put her hand on mine on the table. She didn't say anything. She didn't need to. We sat there until the citronella candle burned down, and then I drove home. She came the next morning. I was up at 6, which is my normal time. I made coffee, sat at the kitchen table with a file I was working through, and waited. I wasn't nervous. I was just waiting, the way you wait for something you've already decided how to handle. At 8:47 in the morning, a gray Camry pulled up in front of my house on Sevier Avenue. I watched from the kitchen window. Carol got out. She looked tired. 13 hours in a car will do that. She was wearing a dark blue jacket and jeans, and she stood on the sidewalk for a moment and looked at the house. Then she walked up to the porch. She knocked. I did not move. She knocked again. Then she rang the bell, which I have but rarely hear because the walls are thick. I stood in the kitchen and watched through the window. She stepped back and looked at the front of the house. She could see the kitchen light was on. She knew someone was home. She knocked a third time. Harder. Ray, she called. Her voice was muffled through the door. Ray, I know you're in there. The light is on. I did not move. She stood on the porch for a while. I watched her. She had her hand on the doorframe, and she was looking at the door, and I could see from the kitchen window that she was composing herself, getting ready to try again. Ray, she called, please, I just want to talk. I drove all the way from Zanesville. I just want to talk. I stood in the kitchen with my coffee mug in my hand. She knocked one more time. Not hard, almost gentle. Then she sat down on the porch step. She sat there for 20 minutes. I watched her the whole time. She had her elbows on her knees, and she was looking at the street, and I could see her shoulders moving once, just once, and I understood she was crying. I did not open the door. After 20 minutes, she stood up. She smoothed her jacket. She walked back to the Camry. She stood by the driver's door for a moment and looked back at the house one more time. I watched her through the kitchen window. She got in the car. She sat there for a few minutes. Then she started the engine and pulled away from the curb and drove down Sevier Avenue and turned left at the light and was gone. I stood in my kitchen in Knoxville, Tennessee, with my coffee mug in my hand, in a house that was mine, in a city that was mine, in a life that was mine. And I watched the gray Camry until I couldn't see it anymore. 5 years later, she discovered where I was living and drove 13 hours to my door. I watched her through the window and never opened it. That's exactly what happened. I set my coffee mug down on the counter. I went back to the kitchen table and picked up my file and started working through it. My phone buzzed. Marta. Well, she said. She came, I said. She sat on the porch for a while, then she left. How do you feel? I thought about it. The golf course, the CarPlay screen, the message on the screen, the pork chops, the kitchen table at 2 in the morning, the garage in the dark, the truck stop in Corbin, Kentucky, the empty house on Sevier Avenue, the pulled pork lunches, the dinner on Market Square, the back porch, and the citronella candle, and her hand on mine. I feel fine, I said. Good, she said. You want to have lunch? I said. Patton's? It's barely 9 o'clock, she said. I know. I just wanted to ask. I could hear her smile through the phone. 11:30, she said. And you're buying. Deal, I said. I hung up. I looked at the kitchen window where the gray Camry had been. Then I looked at my mother's photograph on the windowsill, the one from Christmas 1987. Her face lit up like she had no idea what was coming and was just glad to be there. I picked up my file and went back to work.